So the phone is ringing. It's November 14th, 1975. Anthony Daniels, who is on the other end and what did they want?
It's my agent saying there's this American who's making a low-budget science fiction movie. You've never heard of him, neither have I. His name's George Lucas, and he wants to see you for the part of a robot. Mm-hmm. So there was this pause, and I just said no. Mm-hmm. She said, "What do you mean no?" I said, "I'm not interested." She said, "Don't be so stupid. Mm-hmm. Go and meet him. You never know what it could lead to." And here I am today.
It led to Canadian Public Radio.
Fame at last.
Fame at last. It's a good thing that audition did work out because it opened the door for Anthony Daniels to become one of the most recognizable characters in one of the biggest sci-fi film franchises, or just film franchises of all time. Anthony plays the familiar golden humanoid robot C-3PO, the droid, in the Star Wars films. You can also catch him in the new film The Rise of Skywalker, which hits theaters next month. But mind you, Anthony has just published a new memoir telling his own story and taking you into the life as the famous droid and the life outside of it. It's called I Am C-3PO, The Inside Story. And I'm excited to say, if you didn't just catch him, C-3PO himself, Anthony Daniels, joins me here in the Q studio. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Well, I felt a bit self-conscious playing that song for you just then, but I'm wondering what it brings up when you hear the Star Wars theme now.
Oh, I mean, like everybody, I remember hearing it for the first time when, it crashes in just after that little title a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I've had the huge pleasure, of course, of knowing John Williams on and off over 40-something years. Who even now is tweaking the scoring on Episode 9. And just what a magic combination of talents there. George Lucas, John Williams, J.J. Abrams, and all the others. And curiously, I think John's music is as evocative. You instantly know. It brings back memories. Very, very clever. All his themes, his leitmotifs, and all that kind of thing.
I was so surprised by a couple of things in this book. For one, you're not much of a sci-fi fan. I heard you walked out of 2001.
Yeah, a lot of people did, apparently. I think it was 1968, and it was kind of tedious. It went, space takes a long time to walk through, as it were. And I was too young. Right. Years later, of course, George showed me the real film, the whole thing, and I just thought, wow, what a film. And I watch it now pretty much every time it's on cable. I just kind of like it.
So as someone who wasn't necessarily in love with sci-fi at the time, what was it, back to our first thing we spoke about, that convinced you to take the role?
It was basically down to a concept painting. A concept painting being how something in a film might look, a piece of artwork to indicate the direction you're going in. And here on George's office wall was a painting by Ralph McQuarrie. And in miniature, it is reproduced in the book because it's the face of the character so touched me, and it still does. It's kind of blank wonderment or sense of being lost is right there. And I think the character himself, when he eventually arrived in the movies, still retains that kind of, what's going on? Help me kind of quality.
So much so that we were discussing, we couldn't quite remember. I mean, between Ben, the producer of the segment, and I, we must have seen Star Wars probably in the dozens of times. And we had a moment I said, does C-3PO have eyebrows? And he said, I don't think so. And I said, well, how come he's so expressive? How come I know when he's happy, or how come I know when he's scared? Isn't that interesting?
That's a really interesting point because eyebrows, do really mark the face.
Of course.
They're a real sort of key to what's going on in the eyes behind. 3PO does have these kind of little ledges. It's the most beautiful face. And when I saw it eventually completed by Liz Moore, who sculpted it, I just thought, how beautiful, And he kind of retains that for me. I had to work out ways of using the head tilt, what are the shoulders, the stomach area, which kind of folds in if you're feeling weird, and then these outrageous arm gestures but always remember that the audience is supplying a heck of a lot of emotion themselves, because for a start, you've got John Williams' music, which will tell you instantly what you're feeling, and you've got various scripts that put it in words. So it's not a one-man band.
Let's hear a clip of C-3PO now. This is C-3PO, Anthony Daniels, bickering with his good friend R2-D2 on Tatooine in the original Star Wars film, A New Hope.
Don't get technical with me. What mission? What are you talking about? I've just about had enough of you. Go that way. You'll be malfunctioning within a day, you nearsighted scrap pile. And don't let me catch you following me, begging for help, because you won't get it.
That is C-3PO squabbling with fellow droid R2-D2 in the original Star Wars film A New Hope. Released back in 1977, C-3PO, played by my guest Anthony Daniels, who, while that was on, was mouthing the script along in a moment that I'll treasure for the rest of my life.
And it's become more dramatic, doesn't it? And what you don't realize was that at the time, the only noise that's going on, the only sound is me saying those lines. R2-D2 was put on months later by Ben Burt.
Right.
And also the clunk when I kick him at the end. Ben enhanced that. I made this kind of tiny noise with my shoe. But it's quite funny because every sound there is laid on later. Even my own voice has to be dubbed on after the event because inside the mask you can't possibly use the sound that I'm making on the set. So quite interesting. And in fact, it was at that point, which was a couple of days into shooting, that I said to George, what a surprise and how difficult it was to be talking to myself. Because in the script, it had this dialogue written out. Okay, the R2, it said he beeps or he burbles or whatever. Then my lines. But nobody thought to tell me. 6 months of working together and nobody said, by the way, you're going to be on your own on the set. Nobody's going to be talking to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just one of the many challenges you face in the original Star Wars. And I think about that sometimes. When you and I were talking just before we turned the microphones on about a little bit about how I interpreted the book, which was about you sort of pursuing something that you love against all odds. It's certainly a risky profession. And you wanted to be an actor. And you were sort of encouraged to be a lawyer, but you wanted to be an actor and you became an actor. And I wondered, I want to get you to talk about this a little bit. When you were in the desert in Tunisia, right? In record high heat, and it took how long to put the
First day it took about 2.5 hours to put the costume on, by which point I'd had enough. We hadn't even started shooting. You had to imagine dawns coming up around you because you want to be there for the light and so on. And all that time with maybe 6 people trying to screw me into this outfit. We tried it on briefly at Elstree Studios in London, but this was the first time some 2 weeks later. The one moment of real amazement for me was walking out in that costume and being able to see with tunnel vision directly in front of me so I could kind of scope out the environment. Very strange desert. But groups of people, crew, were just staring at me, at 3PO, in absolute wonderment. And I could see the impact I was having. And it felt kind of exciting, a moment that didn't last, believe me.
But when you were in baking heat and almost actually baked to death at one point inside of the costume, when you could only breathe through that tiny slotted hole, when you couldn't sit down.
That becomes quite a torture in the end, because it's not great for your body to be standing up for long periods, and especially with all that weight on. But this, it was part of the gig, I guess. I just didn't know how big a part it was going to be.
I mean, that's what I wanted to know. You had this dream, this sort of impossible dream of being an actor, something that you felt compelled to do, something that you kind of had no choice to do. But when you were, again, inside this baking hot metal prison, did you think, oh, maybe a lawyer I should have been after all?
Yeah, it would be tempting to think that. But it was my choice, against the odds. And if I had a story to tell anybody, it's, try and, well, that phrase, follow your dream. I just followed my need, It's and my parents wanted me to have a proper life, so being a lawyer or whatever would have been a good thing. But in the end, I just had to do, what I did.
Do you think the other actors understood what you went through?
They would see me getting dressed up, but there's only so many times you can be, a carer, if you will. And I think they cared and they empathized as much, but they had other jobs to do. Mark had to say these ridiculous lines with his face showing, Mark Hamill, and he acted out the sincerity of this farm boy on another planet so well that he really did enhance my performance of 3PO, because he genuinely, face on, spoke to 3PO as a new companion, as a sort of a friend, a colleague, servant, if you will, yes. And back in the early days, pretty much it was Mark and me in the desert, which wasn't a great place to be. But actors shouldn't kind of whinge on about the difficulties of doing it. The hardship. You're there to put something on a screen. People don't want to know what it really takes. Well, except now I'm telling them.
Exactly. I think they do want to know now. I mean,
maybe they do. And certainly in the book, I talked about my feelings rather more than possibly I have in the past.
Including the feelings of, well, I didn't know about this, and it's a bit of a trip talking to you and hearing your voice, but we almost didn't hear your voice, right? The feelings around, they were going to dub you in, right?
I think a lot of people may know the story that when we were filming, I had at that point a little microphone on the top of my forehead there and a cable that went right down to the back of my pants, so I'm speaking out of my butt to the whole nation. But you got a very bad...
Me too.
Yeah. Touché. You got a very bad, vocal quality like that. So immediately afterwards, they would ask me, they'd take the head off and stick a proper microphone near me, and I would wild track the lines. So because they found the editors were going crazy listening to this mumbling. Mm-hmm. So very quickly, I did them the service of giving a clean take with the same timings on, but still not good enough for theatre quality. Mm-hmm. And I think it was about 6 months after I'd actually forgotten about it. Believe it or not, I'd forgotten about Star Wars. I was off doing other stuff. Mm-hmm. And always a phone call. I loved it. I loved your opening effect, by the way. Another phone call.
Nice to hear a phone call again, isn't it?
Oh, and it was the British phone call. I spotted that. That's
mm-hmm.
really...
very good.
Okay. To go to Hollywood for the first time, which seemed a real wow thing to do. I only ever wanted to act. I didn't think what I wanted to act in or why. I just needed to do it. So to go to Hollywood with all its history of acting seemed like a major thing, which it was. If you've never had jet lag before, boy, is that a punch in the face. And that's where I found out, and George was facing me as I found out, that he'd not wanted to use my voice because it wasn't the character he had in mind. He did a primary mistake, as I think a director, is not telling me what he had in mind. Mm-hmm. I would have tried to do something different.
Well, not just that, and I don't want to focus too much on this, but there's a moment you talk about in the book where you Anthony Daniels, you are a C-3PO, but you get the impression that George Lucas wanted to see you as a robot, not as an actor inside, and you were largely left out of the publicity around Star Wars films.
Well, that was the whole production. Fox, Lucasfilm took a decision that really, and it became very clear quite quickly that they were concentrating on Carrie and Mark and Harrison, mm-hmm. and they didn't want people to know that this golden droid was actually mechanized or puppeteered, if you might.
What's that like for you to have sacrificed so much and lived through so much in the desert to be left out of it?
Yeah, it didn't feel good.
No.
Would it feel good to you? Imagine.
I can't imagine that it would. I can't imagine that it would.
Good answer.
But I couldn't put myself in your shoes. But I can't imagine.
And I don't think many people could. But it's like if we're talking about books, writing a bestseller, and the editors forget to put your name on the cover. It was like, oh, I did this, mm-hmm. and nobody knew. So it was a difficult time, and it's with longevity, with. Not even with a gift of slight objectivity through time. Mm-hmm. I can admit it was a difficult period.
But then it becomes the biggest film franchise again in history, and everyone wants to know every single small thing about it, and it becomes a big part. It becomes the biggest part of your life.
It does, and I think those early years of being slightly distanced from it certainly has taken time to clear those shutters away. But I have been around long enough to kind of say these things hopefully in a way that's acceptable to people, and to maybe form another dimension to something that they think they know all about already.
I think that's when we talked about the feelings that are welcome in this book, that's the welcome part of it. That's the human side of this book that I really do love.
Thank you.
There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stories about making the Star Wars films, but I love the insights into other things you had to do as C-3PO, like appearing on The Muppet Show, Sesame Street, Donnie and Marie Osmond's TV show, and then, of course, Anthony, there's this.
Christmas in the stars, Christmas in the stars, what a merry Christmas this will be. Christmas in the stars, out among the stars, lighting up a Christmas tree. Come on, everyone, and sing.
I can't handle.
Love it, I know. Oh, our hearts are full of joy. We were just going into the chorus. They're full of joy.
Can you tell us what we're hearing right now? What is
you were
that?
hearing an excerpt. You should apologize to the listeners for playing it from a record album, a vinyl record of Christmas in the Stars, which was R2 and 3PO basically working in a toy shop where S. Claus, I don't think you were allowed to say Santa Claus or whatever.
It's trademarked.
Was a trademark, yes. Everything is these days. And it was something that was a remarkable piece of craziness that I flew from London to New York on Concorde and back over a weekend. During the week, I was rehearsing a stage play, and suddenly, or TV, I can't remember. And suddenly I'm in New York on Concorde doing this wacky stuff. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, I can't sing. If I had one talent, I wish it would be singing. Mm-hmm. So there was this kind of Sprechgesang thing, this apology, sing.
Christmas in the Stars. Yeah,
but exactly. And with Out Among the Stars, lighting up a Christmas tree. And then it's great fun. They did eventually re-release it only a few years ago on CD and so on. And it is one of those really kitsch things that you can only do at Christmas, like wearing that stupid sweater with baubles on, or drinking eggnog, only at Christmas.
Mm-hmm. It is. Did you mind doing all that extra promo things outside of the actual films for Star Wars? It's such an interesting job for an actor. Most actors don't have to reprise their reprise their roles by going on talk shows as Han Solo or going on, The Muppet Show as, But you had to do that quite often.
I did. It was always enduringly clear that people didn't really want me. They wanted the Goldman because he's kind of unique,
mm-hmm.
And I got to do the gig anyway. So I would have fun. And often, there was some event afterwards. So whereas other people on the show would go into makeup and hair first, I would go into hair and makeup afterwards to repair the damage of what the costume had done to me.
I hear you have it down to about 6 seconds now, though.
No, the face takes 6 seconds. Right. The suit takes about 6 minutes, yeah.
But that's a lot better than 2.5 hours, isn't it?
Tell me about it, yes. It does mean they can take me out of the face and I can breathe and,
Oh, well, what a luxury.
Yeah, surprisingly,
I would say so. Yeah. There's so much in this book, Anthony Daniels, about the films and the fans and about you. I think what really comes across to us is how much you love this character, C-3PO, and how protective you are of this character, especially given that you were reluctant at first to go for the audition. What is it about him or them that has brought you back?
Well, I had a decision when it came to the second movie, The Empire Strikes Back. Would I want to go through all that again? And they eventually the real clincher was that I didn't really want to let 3PO go. I mean, when you think about it, how could I? He would have become a completely different personality with somebody else doing it, or they would have just, wiped him out, have him, run over by some kind of spaceship and splattered, and some new droid comes in. So I did agree. And then, of course, episode 6, I can't do the math.
I know, it's confusing. I keep on trying to say the first one for A New Hope, but it's not. It's the
exactly,
fourth one.
Yeah. It's like one of those weird exam questions when you were 11 years old and trying to go to a better school. Arrange these in the proper order. If it takes 3 men 2 days with 5 shovels, I have the mind that closes at that opening phrase. I don't care. I don't know, because I know I'm going to, how many things in 6 seconds. These TV shows, I panic. So after number 6, then after about 14 years, I think, 1, 2, 3. And now what's magic about the journey that I realized I had written in this book after I had written it, I didn't actually realize that it had a shape. I know it sounds stupid, but hey, because I was writing it in chunks and then weaving the chunks around and thinking how can I relate that? And the serendipity of writing, sometimes you write something up here and think, wait a minute, that relates to something I said over here, and therefore you can go back to over here and foreshadow what you might say later. And that's a bit of the writing I really enjoyed, making the connections. And then in the silliest, cheapest way, if you will, putting in little cliffhangers, because I knew I could go back to the far end and go back to the beginning and presage the far end or whatever.
Dickensian,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And, but he didn't have a computer to write on. I mean, what a man. Hand wrote the whole thing. Sorry, here.
Yeah. But I haven't been able to ask him.
Yeah, you will one day.
One of these days. Speaking of endings, by the way, I want to point out that I don't believe anything from film trailers. I don't put any faith in anything from film trailers at all. I'm regularly ready to have something told to me and then to come into the film. As you smile, as I come into the film and have my mind change. But let me just take it.
I'm saying nothing.
I can see the laser pointer pointed at your forehead. In the trailer for the new Star Wars film, the final chapter of the Star Wars saga, The Rise of Skywalker, there's the trailer and there's C-3PO saying, "I just want to have one last look at my friends."
Yeah.
So I'm not going to ask anything about that because
I
don't believe you. It was a very
touching moment on set.
Oh, I'm glad.
And when I saw it in the trailer, I was equally touched. JJ left it just the way we'd shot it, and there is an enduring. What can you say? 3PO touches us somehow. And I don't know, it's a combination of everything. Part of it's me, part of it's the original writing. Part of it is the 40 years plus that audiences have put into this character. And I meet so many people who were touched by him as a child, and maybe he was a bit of a helpmate to them as they grew up. That his vulnerability kind of reflected their vulnerability, or vice versa. That they found him a bit of somebody whose hand they could hold metaphorically.
Have you prepared yourself for the moment, whether it's now or in the future, that someday that be the last time you put the suit on?
Every time I take it off, I think it's the last time I'm doing that. And then something comes up, and I'm always open. And now surprised but not surprised when a new project comes up. Because these characters, not just 3PO, these characters from the saga are very big, very larger than anybody's life. And the whole event that is Star Wars has become now such an integral part of people's families that they're not going to disappear. And all the performances exist now in the ether forever and ever and ever, whatever device you're listening on.
We'll be seeing you for generations to come.
Yes.
Anthony Daniels' new book is called I Am C-3PO, The Inside Story. Before I say goodbye, and you've been a wonderful guest, thank you for coming in. Can you tell me a story about Alec Guinness? Can you tell me something? Tell me something about Obi-Wan Kenobi, about the real actor behind it?
The real actor behind it, I talk about meeting him on the charter flight to Suez in Tunisia. And I was bold enough to introduce myself. He was sitting across the aisle.
An icon.
And I was diffident. And I thought, well, going to have to meet him sometime and work with him because it was in the script. Oh, by the way, he spoke in the script, unlike R2-D2. He had this language, And just so I introduced myself, and hearing these I do very bad impressions, but the wonderful deep voice that he had, and he couldn't have been kinder from that moment on the plane to eventually I go and stay weekends with him and Lady Guinness, Merrila Guinness, and I just remember how totally normal they were. And I remember they had a dog and they had a pet goat, and we would go for a walk with the dog and the goat. And she was the first person who would she'd do the washing up in a plastic bowl, and then she would walk outside very carefully and put the water on the plants. She was the first conservationist I ever met. Now I do it all the time because, water's important. But they were both so... Oh, and I remember on the mantelpiece, very discreetly, an Oscar. I'd never seen an Oscar before. Never will. So he was a great standby for me because he kind of reassured me that other projects would be different from this. This one was strange. But he was very, very patient and loving. He lost it one day on the stage. He just blew up.
Oh, really?
And you realize how much he was suppressed because it took a long time sometimes. Right. He was a fully rounded character. And I say in the book... that he never, whereas I went through a little doubt whether this was all a good thing, whether it had been a good thing, I came out of the other end of it thinking, this has been a good thing. And sadly, he never really appreciated how much the audience appreciated him for being, as I put it, this old guy in a dressing gown. But they do. They revere his memory as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I just remember him as both people.
I'm nice to hear the human side of him as well. Anthony Daniels is C-3PO, the famous Star Wars droid. You'll have this chance to catch him in theaters again soon in the latest Star Wars film, The Rise of Skywalker, which is out next month, which we did not spoil anything about somehow.
I hope not.
I think we made it. And I should mention that Anthony's new book, I Am C-3PO, The Inside Story, is a must for any Star Wars fans in your life, and it's out now.